Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to process these three photographs in three different ways and we're going to see which one looks the best. Here are the three photos that we're going to be blending today, and this is a seascape I took at my local beach, and like a lot of the sunrise and sunset images we take, there's a lot of dynamic range in this image. Some very bright skies and also some areas that we need to have nice and light, and blending these sorts of exposures is a great way of bringing the most out of the scene. So the problem is here, if we zoom into this one, that we've got this area of sky over here that is blown out. Okay, there is no color information in this area at all. So whilst I could develop this in the normal way and bring the shadows up and drop the highlights, there would always be this hole. And the other thing is that this isn't the best capture of the moving water around the rock. If we move on to the overexposed image, we can see we've got much nicer textures in the water here. It just looks like an all-round better image of the ocean, but of course it's very blown out in the sky. There's lots of lost information here, and we might even be blown out in the water here. And if we look at the underexposed shot, we can see that we've got all the information we need here in the sky to fill in the gaps where the sky was blown out on the normally exposed image. And we've also got some really nice textures in these clouds which we can use to bring out the best in this scene. Okay, so the first technique we can use to blend these images is the HDR mode that is built into Lightroom. Let's have a look how it does. So first of all, we select our three images, and then we can right click on them and say Photo Merge HDR, or press Option H. That will bring up the Merge dialog box and it will create a preview for us. So here's our merged image, and as you can see at the moment I have no deghosting turned on. And actually Lightroom's done an okay job here. It's chosen the nice water movement from the overexposed image. It seems to have brought back some color information to the sky here, and we've got a little bit of a texture in here. So I'm not unhappy with the way this has gone. Let's see what happens if we turn on some deghosting. Let's just set it to low initially and see what changes. So here are the areas of the image highlighted in red that Lightroom's HDR mode says it would apply the deghosting, and we can turn that overlay on and off just to see how it affects the image, and I'm not overly impressed with that. Let's go back to how it was before. Yeah, I think it's definitely better without the deghosting switched on. You'll notice I've got auto align turned on but auto settings turned off. I don't want Photoshop to apply any change of this. So let's merge this image and see how it looks. So Lightroom has now finished merging our three exposures, and here's the resulting image. Let's double click on it to go into it and enter the Develop module and see how we can process this now to improve it. So we're going to do all the standard stuff. So we'll drop the highlights down, and as you can see it's brought in most of the color information here. Let's bring the shadows up, and I'm going to change the white balance, see if we can accentuate these waves a bit better. So let's bring the whites up. Okay, I'm going to have to do this with a graduated mask because it's blowing out the sky too much. So let's return that to normal. We'll grab the graduated mask tool. I'm just going to drag up with a nice feathered edge and apply some white to that. That's a lot better. I'm going to drag the blacks back very slightly just to accentuate this area down here. That's pretty good. Might even apply some extra shadow boost here. Yeah, just a little bit. Okay, that's looking okay. Now what we might do is add a second graduated mask to the top of the image, again with a nice bleed on it. And we're going to apply a bit of dehazing to the sky here, not too much because it quickly goes out of shape. I'll show you what happens if I crank dehazing right up. You get a really horrible looking image, but used judiciously it can add a lot to the image. So I'm just going to apply a little bit, and I've just brought out the textures in the sky here. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to close the graduated mask tool. I'm just going to straighten it because that wonky horizon is annoying me. Oops. Okay, so let's add a little bit of vibrance back into the image. That's nice. Tiny bit of saturation. That's looking pretty good. Might go back into this mask for the sand here and the rocks and just add some clarity to accentuate that water there. Yeah, that's pretty nice. And also a little bit of texture. That's looking pretty sweet. Okay, so the final thing we need to do is color correct this slightly, because as you can see we've got quite purple water here, and of course this would be tinted by the setting sky, but it's not natural. The camera had some trouble picking the right colors for the white balance here, so I'm just going to hop into the color grading section and click on the mid-tones, and I'm just going to move this circle away from the purples and magentas and up towards the more greeny blue. So if you watch this area down here as I drag, you'll see what the change that makes. And we'll just move that away. Yeah, that's looking a lot more natural. That seems about right, about there. Excellent. So here's the resulting image for the HDR. I'm not unhappy with this. It's quite a subtle blending of the images, but let's see what other techniques we can do as well. So the next technique that we're going to try to blend these three images is using a plugin called Infuse. This is a kind of exposure blending, and the idea behind this particular software that we're going to use is that the pixels in the input images are given a weight, a value that correlates to qualities such as the exposure and the contrast and the saturation of that images. And then once that has been determined, it uses something called multi-resolution spline blending to combine the images, and the resulting images I find are a lot more natural looking than HDR. So let's do it. Let's select our three images. I'm going to go up to my plugins up here, plugin extras, and come down to Infuse and click blend exposures. So here's the configuration box. This is a paid for plugin. I'll put the link to it down in the description. And I've left all these things at default. I really don't change anything. You can tweak the level of the exposure and all this kind of stuff, but I've always found that the default settings work really well for me. So I'm just going to click the Infuse image buttons and see what happens. Okay, the image is finished processing. What I've done is copied the baseline edits from the HDR image over onto the infused image. And as you can see, there are some quite big differences in the two, and most obviously there's considerably more contrast in the HDR one than in the infused image. It's a much more subtle effect. You'll also note that there is much more pleasing gradation of color in this problematic highlight area here than in the HDR one, and there's a hell of a lot of contrast in the clouds. This is a much more subtle, and to my eye, a much more pleasing and more natural looking image over here. So an alternative to using either HDR or infusing images with these automatic parameters is to do a manual combination of images in Photoshop. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this, and one of the simplest, particularly in scenes like this where you have quite a clear division between a foreground which is well lit and a sky that isn't, is to combine the two shots with a straight mask. So what I'm going to do is select my darkest exposure and my lightest one with the water I like, and I'm going to add them as layers in Photoshop. Okay, so our two images have opened in Photoshop. There's the bright one and there's the dark one. So the first thing we need to do is tweak these. So I'm going to open the bright layer with the camera raw filter. It's overexposed, so I'm just going to drop it down slightly, not too much. And I'm going to drop the blacks down just to put a bit of contrast in here. Let's crank up the vibrance. Bring that colour back in. Same on that one. Very slight dehaze. Add some clarity. Let's bring the highlights down slightly. And remember, like I say, we don't care about the sky on this, we only care about this beach layer at the bottom. So that's looking okay. Maybe slightly bit more. So let's drop the contrast, the exposure down, and then boost the shadows to bring back, yeah, that's nice. Okay, looking pretty happy with that. So let's click OK on that one. And now let's edit the top layer. Same deal. Oh, helps if I select it. Camera raw filter. Opposite with this one, we need to bring the exposure up, but not too much because we don't want to blow out this area here. Let's drop those highlights down. That's looking pretty nice. Keep me an eye on that area there. Okay, and let's add some light to the shadows. Our white balances out too. Let's bring that up. And a little bit of contrast in there. Let's add the colour back in. And some saturation. And a little bit of clarity. Okay, tiny little bit more exposure. Yeah, okay, around about there I think. It's looking pretty sweet. We don't care about this section here. Right, let's click OK. So before we combine these two, let's align them. So let's go to the Auto Align Layers. Just click on the automatic option. Might have to crop slightly. Not very much at all. Very little in that. Just turn the snap off. It already is. Just bring this in very slightly just to get rid of the white edge there. That's good. Okay, now we can do the mask. Okay, so on this particular layer, the top one, the bright layer, hit the mask button, and then making sure that I have black selected as my foreground, I'm going to the gradient tool, and I'm going from black to transparent, and I'm just going to go towards the center of the image on the horizon, and I'm just going to drag down like so. And immediately we get an extremely pleasant gradation of images combined nicely and sensitively. We've combined the best part of these two exposures from the bracketed shots I took of this sunset. So we've got the nice water movement here and we've got the nice skies here. So what I'm going to do now is flatten this one, and we'll view it in Lightroom alongside the other two. So here are our three images, guys. We've got the Photoshop edit in the top left here, the two layers. We've got the HDR version over on the right here, and we've got the Infuse one down the bottom. Which one's your favorite? I think that the truest image from a landscape photography perspective is the Photoshop edit in the top left. I think that's certainly the most accurate depiction of the scene that I saw when I was taking this photograph. I think the most Instagram friendly one is definitely the HDR version, a lot more contrasty, and certainly something that would suit the Instagram platform a lot better. The Infuse one I like, but I think the graining's gone a bit wrong on the right here. We've got this quite greeny sort of section with the waves here. I could probably fix that up. I don't know whether that was to do with the blending process or my poor color grading skills. But there you go, guys. 3 ways to edit bracketed shots, 3 ways to achieve an effect, and 3 different styles that you might like to try with your own images in these high dynamic landscape photography scenarios. Thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the old like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.